What is a scientific fact that absolutely blows your mind? Slime molds don't have brains or nervous systems but somehow retain information and use it to make decisions. Even more crazy is that they can fuse with another individual and share the information. I'm not a biologist and this is from memory, but what I remember is fascinating. They rely on nutrient gradients to replace neurons. Internally they contain tubes that grow larger based on the amount of nutrient they transport, so more food equals larger paths equals they expand more in that direction. That's how they can solve mazes. They expand in all directions, but once one bit touches the food, that pathway gets reinforced, just like neural pathways, and the rest of the organism flows there. There are actually blood vessels obstructing light from reaching certain areas in your eye, effectively creating a shadow. Your brain filters this out and essentially fills in the gaps so you don't actually see this spiderweb-like network of black lines. However, you can visualize them by shining a light at a diagonal into your eye, not directly, and gently wiggling it about. This means your brain doesn't have enough time to filter it out and you see this spiderweb-like network of blood vessels. Technical instructions to clarify the actions involved. I find it easier to see this effect in a dark environment, so the contrast of the black shadow against the light is higher. You want to be staring straight ahead and shining the light into your pupil at a 45-degree angle from the side directed at your nose at about 10 to 20 centimeters away from them. Phone light will do great and have it on the dimmest setting if possible. Then wiggle the light in gentle 1 centimeter movements side to side. Keep this up for about a second at least and you should see them. Hope this clears it up a bit. Caterpillars basically dissolve into liquid in the cocoon. The only thing left are the so-called imaginal discs, groups of cells that contain all the information and the mechanism to turn that soup into the various body parts of a butterfly. The same applies for other insects. There are neurons in your stomach. Bacteria in your stomach uses chemical signals to communicate with your body telling you what kind of food to eat. You can change what kind of food you crave by replacing the bacteria. T-Rex lived 66 million-ish years ago. Stegosaurus lived 155 million-ish years ago. The gap between Rex and Stego is 16 million-ish greater than between Rex and present day. I'm not a biologist and this is from memory, but what I remember is fascinating. They rely on nutrient gradients to replace neurons. Internally they contain tubes that grow larger based on the amount of nutrient they transport, so more food equals larger paths equals they expand more in that direction. That's how they can solve mazes. They expand in all directions, but once one bit touches the food, that pathway gets reinforced, just like neural pathways, and the rest of the organism flows there. Dinosaurs lived on the other side of the galaxy from where we are now. Milky Way local with the galactic history. Also the lact in the word galactic is a clue that it's related to the word lactose, as they're all ultimately related to the Proto-Indo-European word for milk. Hence why we call it the Milky Way, due to its milky appearance. This is what I think about with time travel. If it's not relatively bound to the Earth, you'd travel back in time and 99.999% end up in the vacuum of space. Thanks for Gold Stranger. Imagine if time travel were possible and every time someone invented the time machine so far they just forgot about this little issue. The outcome would be the same, D. That's why time/space are linked together. There's people smarter than us trying to make things beyond our comprehension a possibility. If time was a possible thing to travel through, then space would have to go into the calculations just like they do with orbits. It's the same with sand. There are more atoms in one grain of sand than there are sand grains on Earth. If this is true, it's the most interesting fact I've seen in one of these threads in a long time. If two pieces of the same type of metal touch in space, they will bond and be permanently stuck together. Space welding, cold welding. I do a version of cold welding for a living, explosive welding. We use explosives to drive the two metals together at a high enough speed that they permanently bond. We primarily bond dissimilar metals, Al and SS, Cu and T, steel and T etc. Little to no heat is imparted into the metals, and the resulting bond is typically stronger than the weaker metal. The process works because a properly designed collision will generate a plasma that strips off the oxide layers of both metals milliseconds before bonding. One perk of our process is that we can apply layer after layer of metal as needed. For example, aluminum and stainless are not chemically compatible over the long term, so we separate them with a thin layer of titanium. Our customer base is extremely varied: aerospace, petrochemical, science, etc. It makes sense when you understand why it happens. I forgot most stuff including my name, but it has to do with free space in metal atoms that allow them to bond with each other. It does not happen normally on Earth because all sorts of other atoms get in the way. I recently read about the split brain experiments. There is a procedure for severe epilepsy that involves cutting the connecting nerves of the two brain hemispheres, resulting in the two hemispheres being unable to communicate with each other. The experiment shows that both halves can answer questions independently of each other, have separate opinions/preferences, form memories independently. Basically suggesting that there are two minds in the brain. That just blows my minds. Typos. I remember seeing videos about this in high school biology. Not only what you have said, but also since each hemisphere has different tasks and you cut their connection, a lot of things become different. For example, if they cover your eyes and give you an object you are familiar with, you are not able to identify it only by touch, because there is no communication between the two hemispheres. You have to see the object to be able to fully identify it. Scary shit. More crazy even is that in certain scenarios where this procedure happened, one could hold up an object with their right hand looking at it only with their right eye, with the left eye blindfolded. When they were asked whether or not they knew what the object was, they would answer positively, but when asked what it was they wouldn't be able to name it or describe it, despite affirming they knew what the object was. I think it had to do with the fact that there are many zones in the brain at play in this experiment: language, memory, visual perception, touch, that are unable to communicate correctly with each other. To me, the most fascinating part is when the experimenters were able to command the non-speaking part of the brain to do an action without informing the speaking part, like hold up a sign that only one eye could see that said "take off your shoes." Then they would ask the person why they took off their shoes, and the person would explain it, fully convinced that they made the choice to do the action on their own. They would make up some justification for it, like their feet were getting hot. There really is no indication that we actually have any control over our own choices and actions, because even when they are initiated from a third party, we remain fully convinced that it was our own decision. We are just observers that think we are in control when we're not. On a related note, people with certain types of blindness will still mirror a smile because the part of our brain that handles emotional contagion makes use of visual information independently of the visual processing part of our brain. You don't need to actually see someone's emotional state in order to respond to it. Are you saying that the blind person sees the smile and mimics it, but the mind is incapable of creating a visual image? Yes, it's called blindsight. Another cool example is when you throw a ball at an otherwise blind person, and they reflexively catch it. It's rare, though, as it requires damage in the brain causing it to be incapable of processing the image on a conscious level. Basically, some people who are blind have perfectly functional eyes, but it's the part of their brain that processes images that doesn't work and makes them blind. However, more than one part of our brain is connected to our eyes, including a part related to reading faces. That part of the brain can still see and give people a sense of the body language of the person they are talking to. You know, I never thought about it, but being blind due to your brain instead of your eyes makes a ton of sense. I always just assumed that every blind person's eyes were at fault. It makes no sense to me that we can see stars in the sky, even with telescopes. When you think about how far that is, I can't wrap my head around being able to see them in the sky. Well, that's because they're as unimaginably big as they are far. Looking up and seeing the stars and the vastness of space fills me with both awe and sadness. I am in awe of all the beautiful stars and nebulae and galaxies out there. I am sad that I will be long gone before our species ever begins to explore those realms. We're too early to explore the universe, but at least we get to see pictures of it. Hopefully the James Webb brings us some amazing images and discoveries. Without the development of genuinely sci-fi travel technology like wormholes or hyperspace, which may not even be possible, 99.99%+ of the universe will be forever locked off from us. Because of cosmic expansion, The various galactic clusters are moving away from our local cluster faster than we could ever catch up to them. Without these sci-fi drives, 99% of our galaxy will be forever locked off, let alone other galaxies/galactic clusters. So I live in Hawaii and I'm going night snorkeling with Anta Rays on my honeymoon in a couple of weeks. I can't wait. Also, it's whale season now, so the humpback are here. And I mean, you know, whales are massive, but they are mind-bogglingly massive in person. It's a whole new thing seeing an animal the length of 2 buses and weighing in at 30 tons launch itself completely out of the water is an awe-inspiring display of power. Just got back from a week long in Kauai. Saw 2 whale mamas teaching their babies to swim, and from far away I thought the babies were adults. Then I saw mom's tails and fins, and holy shit. It's not just between Earth and Moon, that's how vast space is everywhere. It's truly almost impossible to wrap your mind around the idea of just how overwhelmingly empty space really is. You know those tense scenes in sci-fi movies where the heroes have to navigate through an asteroid belt without crashing? In an actual asteroid belt, the average distance between each rock is 500,000 miles, and that counts as close together in astronomical distances. Space is big. Really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, but that's just peanuts to space. Sharks are older than trees. Also, trees almost killed all land life on Earth, as there used to be nothing that could decompose them, so dead trees covered the ground and killed all other vegetation. Only once fungus evolved did trees start decomposing. Well, this comment effing exploded? This was really an off-the-cuff comment based off something I heard years ago, so I figured I'd correct my mistakes and add more detail. The period in which this occurred was known as the Carboniferous period. Fungus had evolved long before this, around 600 million years before, but it had not evolved the ability to decompose trees due to them evolving during this period. These first trees were actually more closely related to ferns and reproduced via spores rather than seeds. Also, these trees would not have killed all land life, sorry to disappoint, due to wildfires clearing out the dead trees. That said, the lack of decomposing fungi, which use up oxygen in the decomposition process, and the extremely high number of photosynthesizing plants lead to very high oxygen levels during this period. As high as 15% higher than modern levels. This allowed the insects of the time to grow to massive sizes. Insects have a fairly inefficient respiratory system, so without high oxygen levels it's difficult for them to grow to large sizes. Now you might be asking how large. Well, dragonflies were the size of hawks, spiders were the size of house cats, and millipedes were as long as 8 feet. Truly a fascinating point in our planet's history. The strongest known acid is called fluoroantimonic acid, and it is made by combining a solution of 2 different ions in various quantities. Without going too crazy into the scientific details, the part that blows my mind is that at certain ratios of the 2 ingredients you can get an acid that is 1 quadrillion times stronger than 100% pure sulfuric acid. At acidity levels like this, pH fails to even be a useful metric, as the pH of any solution would certainly be less than 0. Additionally, it is so acidic that it can force carbon atoms to have 5 bonds instead of 4, breaking one of the fundamental principles of organic chemistry. A group of monkeys, I forget where, was filmed using hand tools at an abandoned work site. One even used a saw to cut a piece of lumber, likely mimicking what it had seen a human do. They seemed to do this out of curiosity, not for any useful purpose. It made wonder what had happened if one of them got the inspiration to cut down a tree, and use the wood. How would the other monkeys react? Would they perceive the significance of this ability? Also, I believe it'd be the first time an animal used a tool to create raw materials. It's rather mind-blowing to think about. The WOW signal came from a planet/bit in space 17,000 light-years away. It emitted a signal 30x stronger than anything we can make today. It lasted for an entire 71 seconds, was on 1444 Hz, frequency of hydrogen, most abundant thing in the universe, and we couldn't find the signal again after pointing to the same spot. Wasn't a galaxy it came from. If we go to a certain distance in space, then we can see a lot of our history, like Germany under Hitler's rule, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 9/11, Me Doing Your Mom, the asteroid killing all dinosaurs and so much more. What bothers me is that this we're going from events further in the past to closer ones, Hitler ruling Germany greater than the bombs greater than 9/11 greater than You Doing My Mom, but then suddenly the asteroid killing all dinosaurs. Which suggests to me that, dinosaurs are gonna make a comeback but then go away for the same reason they did last time. The time period in which dinosaurs lived is so vast, there were dinosaur fossils when dinosaurs were still alive. A lot of people are rightly pointing out that there are currently human fossils around too. I admit that I thought that the fossilization process took a lot longer. I'm still blown away by the scale of time though. The total span of the age of dinosaurs, from the beginning of the Triassic to the end of the Cretaceous, was nearly 3 times longer than the time from the end of the Cretaceous to now. Exponential power. Fold a big sheet of paper, that is 0.1 millimeters thick, 50 times and the height of stack is over 20 times the distance Earth to Moon. Thank you. This is one that I just absolutely cannot wrap my head around. I know the math checks out, but my brain refuses to visualize it or accept that it could be real. Thank you to everyone who replied with examples and explanations. I really loved the discussion that ensued. I wonder if the replies you lot provided were posted in an exponential pattern? Probably not quite, hee hee. Fat cells die. The process takes a long time, and it's really interesting how it works. I didn't know before I read more about it. Fascinating. To post the process. When you are not eating fasting through a meal or a day, or you are exercising, your body must draw on its internal energy stores. Your body's prime source of energy is glucose. In fact, some cells in your body, such as brain cells, can get energy only from glucose. The first line of defense in maintaining energy is to break down carbohydrates, or glycogen, into simple glucose molecules. This process is called glycogenolysis. Next, your body breaks down fats into glycerol and fatty acids in the process of lipolysis. The fatty acids can then be broken down directly to get energy, or can be used to make glucose through a multi-step process called gluconeogenesis. In gluconeogenesis, amino acids can also be used to make glucose. In the fat cell, other types of lipases work to break down fats into fatty acids and glycerol. These lipases are activated by various hormones, such as glucagon, epinephrine and growth hormone. The resulting glycerol and fatty acids are released into the blood, and travel to the liver through the bloodstream. Once in the liver, the glycerol and fatty acids can be either further broken down or used to make glucose. Eli 5, if you're successfully dieting, your body will take energy from existing fat cells, pulling triglycerides out of the cell. These cells refill with water until the cell begins to break down. Once the cell can no longer hold water, fat cells form with triglycerides and die without triglycerides. The way I understand it, the cell breaks down. The cell waste enters your filtration system, sweat and urine, and is secreted. So burning fat is a misnomer. More accurately, peeing fat is the way it happens, and I've heard some refer to it as the whoosh effect, where lots of fat cells die at once and you spend a day or more peeing a lot. I've also been successfully dieting for 18 months, 251 pounds to 183 pounds with no change to physical activity. I can confirm from anecdotal experience that this is how it happened for me. There could be other ways this occurs. The fact that we are all dead in practical terms for forever. We were not alive for billions of years before birth, and we will be dead for billions of years after death, with only a blink of conscious existence in deep time. As Mark Twain put it, I've been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. When you look at the sky at night, there is something visible to the human eye that is not even in our galaxy. It's 2.5 million light years from our galaxy, and we can still see it without any assistance. For reference, the Milky Way itself is 100k light years across. The fact that we can see something that far away, and that we can see outside our home galaxy, blows my mind. My memory has been corrected. There are other things outside the galaxy we can see unaided, but they are closer. When you look at the sky at night, there is something visible to the human eye that is not even in our galaxy. And, for all we know, it might not even be there anymore, The photons of that light left there 2.537 million years ago. Those photons have been traveling non-stop for all that time, just to end up absorbed in the eyeball of some stupid animals that happen to be looking up at that exact moment. I always read stuff like, oh by the way, ancient Greeks built a steam engine and use it for entertainment and stuff, and think, what if? Can you imagine having steam engines in antiquity? Imagine being an archer in the Middle Ages and defending the city from soldiers who are laying tracks to the gate so they can ram a 100-ton steam-powered battering ram through the gates. Then some genius figures out that you can eject projectiles from a pressurized tube and steam cannons get invented. Imagine our entire technology to be ground up developed from the idea of steam power. And to have an industrial revolution by the time of the Roman Empire. Solids and liquids don't burn. Only their vapors and gases. That's why you can't just throw a huge log on the fire and have it burn, you need to haul its temperature up until the surface starts pyrolysis and turning into a gas, which then burns. Good example is gasoline, petrol versus diesel. Petrol produces vapors at quite low temps so you can throw a match on it and ignite them. Diesel does not, so you can't light it by flicking a match into a pool of it. It's the vapors that burn, not the liquid solid. Once told my partner that I was disappointed because he woke me up before I found out who the murderer was in my dream, and he said that it didn't make any sense because it was me dreaming it, so of course I would know how it ended. I feel so justified now. Also, that was the best dream I ever had that I can remember. It was a murder mystery musical. I can barely remember any of it now, but I do remember there was a whole musical number about a pony that someone was convincing someone else to let them buy.
Consider subscribing this video if you enjoyed and wish to see more. Thanks for watching.